I made a video using a few instruments and a loop pedal, and somebody asked me, well, how do you use a looper then? Well, let's take a look. I made a video, Horace Silver's The Preacher, using various instruments but using the loop pedal to help me build it up from the beginning. Now, looping is something that's, it's fairly obvious. You record something and then it plays back in a loop. I've got here the Roland Cube 40XL, which has a looper built in. It's 80 seconds of looping, just mono looper, and it's actually very basic, and that's one of the reasons I've chosen it for this demo, is that essentially the controls are the same, but there's no other frou-frou to worry about. Now, we've got one control on here, and that is simply the volume at which the loop plays back. And that's actually really important. It's very easy for something to build up and go and to be literally just this sort of cacophony of mess, especially if you're adding 3 or 4 or 5 things, you know, sort of slapping the guitar or whatever it is you do. So make sure that you have the playback volume at a level that allows each subsequent loop to actually be controllable. You don't want to have to play too loudly to compete with what's gone before. Now, I have a foot switch on the floor here which controls the looper in the amp. There's a little button here that you can use, but obviously that's, you know, that's a little bit more tricky to use. 3 colours with looping. Red, the light is red, it means you're recording. The light is green, you're playing back. And the light yellow, that is when you are overdubbing, when you're adding to your loop. Some pedals allow you to undo an overdub of that loop. This particular one doesn't, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. At least it means that it's more important for me to play properly. So, I've got my bass here and a guitar. Now I'm going to record a loop, but I'm going to press record right on the first beat of the bar. Now that worked all right, but there are instances where that is going to prove a problem. Now, with something like this, the bass, it's not very, there's not that much of an attack on the beginning of the note. But if you put all of your efforts into literally trying to get the note and the button aligned completely, that could prove to be your undoing. The other thing you could do is to trigger it on the final 8th note or quaver of the previous bar. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then trigger it in the same place on the out. So if it's a 2-bar loop, it would be 1 7/8, or the last 8th note of that second bar. So if I do that, it means that I haven't put all the emphasis on trying to get it right at the beginning. Of course, this is dependent on the riff. You know, if you're triggering the last 8th note to stop the loop, you don't really want a note there at all. Okay, so I've got my loop there. I left a little gap at the end, and now I've got my guitar. So that loop is playing at the moment. The light is green, which means playback. That colour coding does also apply to the Digitech Jamman Stereo, which is another looper that I've got, which is fantastic. Now I've got my guitar here, and I'm going to overdub something. Now, at this stage, it would be a really good idea to overdub, if you can, so that it's not in the same place. You don't start the loop where the other loop starts, you start halfway through. Notice that the level of this also dropped. And now I can play over the top of it, having remembered to put the thing on playback. Don't leave it on overdub. So the light is green. I could put another little guitar counter line on maybe. etc, etc. The other button here, the stop button, simply stops that loop, and then you can press that same button again to restart it. If you hold the stop button, it deletes everything that you've recorded. Some, like the Digitech Jamman Stereo and the Boss RC40 loop station, for example, they will allow you to store your loops. I never do that. Everything I do is on the fly. I just think it's more fun that way. You're not just playing with the same loops. So there is a little bit about looping. I had these two things going through a mixer, by the way, to feed the amp. I didn't have to swap out leads, but you can just have a tiny little mixing desk that feeds your guitar amp or PA or whatever it is that you're using, so that you can just wander from one instrument to the other.